Okay, so welcome. If you're here or if you're watching this later, I felt inspired to do this series of watery goddesses. And I'm going to share a bit about my recent trip to Scotland, to the Cairngorms, where I was really blown away by the water there, this purity of this water from the Ice Age. And I feel like the water itself gave me some kind of transmission that I can't consciously put into words, but I feel will make itself known creatively during the month of October. I'm going to be looking at 4 different goddesses. So today I'm going to look at Sedna, the Inuit goddess. Very interesting one. I'm also going to look at Celestia, who she was the wife of Neptune, and she kind of got him into shape. So one of the emerging themes that's come out of this period is also how the feminine can shape the masculine. And some of you will be doing the Kali meditation, which has really brought this through, that the feminine in its higher frequency, so this is not manipulating the masculine or controlling or anything like that, but it's actually a very nurturing, holding energy that we can apply to our own yang energy first as women. And then, I've been seeing it kind of ripple out into the world and really kind of thinking, wow, this is something new I've never seen before. So we'll be exploring through all these goddesses, actually changing gender roles and the masculine, feminine. The third session, I'm going to do Circe on her island. It's a very interesting relation to Odysseus and other masculine figures. And then the final one will be Scylla, who's a sea monster, who kind of really represents, if you like, the shadow of the feminine. So we're going to go through this whole kind of journey. I don't know exactly where it's going. I'm just kind of following my intuition and creativity and see where that takes us. So before we started the recording, we were just talking about water in different places that we live. So we've mentioned the Johannesburg area of South Africa, which is very, very dry at the moment, and Southern California, which is also a dry climate, but because they've had a lot of rain, it's actually feeling quite fertile and good there. Britain is in an interesting place. We've had a lot more rainfall than usual in the last few years. And although that kind of feels like normal in some ways, because it's a very rainy place anyway, there are things showing that certain animals like swifts and swallows are actually making it all the way over from Africa to here, and there's not enough insects now because of the rain for them to survive in their early years. So the amount of rain here is having an impact. And one of the things I'd like to hold is that we could intentionally create more balance on the earth between moist and dry and hot and cold, in the same way we do in our bodies. It's interesting, we've started the autumn and for some the spring cleanse here today, and just been talking about this kind of balancing. And it's like, what if we could balance Gaia herself through our intentional imagination? So that's a big ask, but I'm holding it anyway. Okay, so I'm going to do a little presentation, and then we can have a chat. Some of you may or may not know where your Sedna is. I have done Sedna before. I'm sort of looking at her from a slightly different perspective this time. Okay, so let me open this up. So, in a nutshell, what I've called this is healing waters, transforming gender relationships through the goddess Astroys and TNO. So, I've mentioned before we'll be doing Sedna, Salacia, Circe, and Scylla, all the Sis goddesses, and they're all water goddesses. That we will be focusing on, water nymphs or mermaids. Okay, so we have been transiting Gene Key 48, and I just wanted to begin with this quote. We're actually beginning this series as the sun's transiting the line 6 today, which is the last day of the transit. But this really struck me. From time immemorial, humans have intuitively grasped that wisdom is feminine in essence. The great goddesses of many cultures are representations of this understanding. But wisdom itself is beyond opposites. The nature of the feminine simply points the way towards this embodiment. The images that have been used to describe wisdom are thus feminine in nature. Water, wells, springs, valleys, and darkness are all examples. Water is one of the greatest symbols for the nature of wisdom because its nature is paradoxical. It is empty yet full, weak yet strong, resistant yet yielding. Ultimately, it shapes itself to the vessel it is held in, and when the vessel is gone, it dissipates yet lives on. So this is from the Gene Keys book by Richard Rudd, that paragraph. So throughout this exploration, just holding this idea that the wisdom of the feminine is embodied through this element of water. It's empty yet full, weak yet strong, resistant yet yielding, and it shapes itself to the vessel it is held in. And this is what I'm feeling being transmitted about the masculine, is that actually in the higher frequencies, the masculine yields beautifully into this feminine watery holding. There's no resistance, there's no kind of power struggle between the masculine and feminine anymore. And it's about hitting the right frequency. And yeah, so it's an exploration. I'm not saying I'm there by any means, or I'm certainly there in moments, but definitely not all the time. And I'm really interested in how everyone interacting with this is experiencing that feminine masculine interplay. Okay, so some of you will know that I recently went to the Cairngorms, which are very big mountains in Scotland, and swam in these lochs. So what inspired this journey was a couple of years ago, I was actually listening to one of Robert Macfarlane's books, and he talked about this author I'd never heard about called Nan Shepherd, and this book called The Living Mountain. So Nan Shepherd was around after the First World War. I've mentioned her before because she was one of millions of women who were without a husband after the war, because there was such a difference between the amount of men and women. And women dealt with this in many different ways. And what Nan Shepherd did is she went and walked the Cairngorms. And what really stuck with Robert Macfarlane, what he said is most books about mountains are about this kind of alpha male who climbs the mountain, and the whole point of climbing it is to get to the top. And so it's a very kind of goal yang orientated. Whereas what Nan Shepherd did is she walked around and in and out in these kind of bowls, so you can even go inside the mountain. And she did it for years and years, and it's extremely poetic. And in fact, he also says she's one of the earliest writers, although she doesn't use the word embodiment. This is so much is embodiment, what she is writing about. So on the night train I took from London to Edinburgh, I listened to the book again. And the chapter that really captured my imagination is all about these lochs. They're from the Ice Age. So the water in them is very, very old and very, very pure as well. And she's talking about this emerald loch and this black loch, and I'm like, oh my God, I really want to swim in these lochs when we get there. But the Cairngorms is huge, and I have no idea where I'm going. I'm going to meet a friend. And so I was like, oh, but I probably won't be able to swim in these lochs. Anyway, I get off my train, and the first thing my friend says to me is, I thought we could walk to lochs and swim in them. And I'm like, yes. So 2 of the lochs closest to us were this black peaty waters of Loch Morlech. And when you swim in this water, it's just like, it looks black, so you can't see through it. But when your body's in it, it's like your hands and your body are all golden red. It's like the most amazing experience. And actually, strangely for Scotland, it was very warm that first day we arrived. And there's like a beach at Loch Morlech that was, you know, like a beach at Blackpool or something that day, because there were so many people on it. And then the temperature dropped to more Scottish temperatures in the following days. And then we got to swim also in the Emerald Loch, which is called, hopefully I'm pronouncing this reasonably well, and Loch Nuain. And it's very emerald. I think it's got a very high copper content. And but in mythology or legend, it's said to be so green because the fairies wash their clothes in it. And this whole place is like very ancient, huge Caledonian woodland with lots of fly agaric, which is, it's like red, it's what we imagine as fairy mushrooms. They're red with little white dots, and this fly agaric is everywhere in this forest. So it just felt like really, really, you know, like a place between dimensions somehow. Okay, so I'm going to jump back a bit, because I feel what really wants to be spoken about in this water healing is this thing about the masculine and the feminine. And a couple of years ago, before I got together with Adam, we actually did a pilgrimage in North Yorkshire to St. Alcalda. And this is an image I created. We weren't together at this time, but this is my friend Paul, who I went to the Cairngorms with. This is Adam, and this is me. I've actually become the water in my picture. And I wrote, so one of the things that happened on this pilgrimage, we walked very high up onto the moorland, and we crossed over a watershed. So a watershed is where the water changes direction. So it could be flowing that way down a mountain or a hill, and then you cross the watershed and it starts flowing in the other direction. And as I walked over this watershed, this inner voice said to me, your life is just completely going to change. And I was like, okay, I'm used to change, but little did I know, like, what a huge leap was going to be made. And a couple of months later is when Adam and I actually got together. And there was no inkling of this at the time when we did the pilgrimage. But I want to read you the poem that I wrote in the days following walking over the watershed. The pilgrimage of Saint Alcalda took us with crunching feet high into the clouds, across a fissure of lime and gritstone to a watershed, a divide between drainage areas in the land, a crucial turning point, a place of no return, where the waters begin their fertile cascade. Butterflies waft on wild blackberry flowers. A bull makes hay with a cow. Hidden dangerous holes in the limestone, a place of death, but also rebirth. The mournful call of the curlew and flocks of plovers rise into the sky from the heathery moors, and the red kite soars to glorious applause amidst the oyster catchers. For three companions, communion, laughter, and intense pain, persistence brings breakthrough, learning to live lighter and simpler. A meeting at the edge of a new world, and where will we flow to next? At least we know we have this ancient friendship to carry with us wherever we go. So it was a very profound 4 days we spent walking together. And for those of you interested in gene keys, we all three of us have our emotional intelligence. The EQ is the 59th gene key that moves from dishonesty to intimacy to transparency. And it feels like this incredible, beautiful energy field was with us while we were walking. So through these past years, I've talked about it in bits and bobs, and in this course, I'm going to focus really on trying to pin down how these goddesses have really helped me negotiate this relationship, which has not been straightforward at all. And these goddesses have helped me stay in my integrity and power, but also stay open-hearted and navigate this feels like a very perilous relationship of the shadows of the feminine and masculine in our world. With all these archetypes I'm going to share, I felt like we were living out these archetypes in some way. So I'm going to go much deeper into this, but this is in a nutshell what these goddesses did. So Celestia, she was the first really to come in. How to reshape the masculine into better husband material, less crude and more emotionally sensitive. The art of detachment with an open heart. And I think she's of interest to women now and men, because many women now, they just can't tolerate that old kind of relationship. And Celestia helps the masculine and feminine actually come into this more intimate transparency and more emotionally sensitive space so that there can be more love. So Circe really showed me my shadow of insecurity, inviting independence, wisdom, especially with the use of magic, and holding the deep well of loneliness I really came face to face with inside. And then finally, Scylla, the final showdown with the jealous and destructive shadow self through a growing capacity for love and trust. I'm saying a showdown, but this isn't an aggressive energy at all I'm talking about. It's about integrating parts of the self, which, if they're not integrated, mean that our relationships are not maybe as full and bright and beautiful as they could be. Okay, so let's talk about the Inuit Goddess Sedna. This is her number here, 90377, and she's what's called a trans-Neptunian object. So they're out beyond Pluto. They have very, very long orbits, these bodies. So what I felt with Sedna is the melting of frozen parts of myself and trauma that was kind of frozen, becoming unfrozen, which is not really comfortable at all, but it felt like almost like the ice melting on the earth, that metaphorically there's parts of us and our human consciousness that is melting too. So Sedna has a quite difficult relationship with her father. Her father comes to kind of get her from this abusive relationship, but then under threat, he throws her into the sea. And my own dad died in October 2024. And for many years, I'd struggled with a lot of betrayal and feelings of really wanting to connect with him in the end, but not really being able to. And I think this is one of the things that is changing, is this emotional sensitivity is opening up, which facilitates a much deeper connection between fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, partners, children. So it's working on every level. But I felt with my father's death, I was able to release a lot of these old stories, and Sedna was part of that releasing. Sedna's also helped me reclaim younger parts of myself who were more adventurous and independent, didn't actually ever want to get married when I was young. So kind of remembering that I have these other parts and they need tending to and nurturing as well. Moving beyond the power of the traumatized victim. So Sedna is once her father, she sort of sinks to the bottom of the sea once her father throws her out of the boat, and her fingers become the dolphins and the seals and the walruses. And then you get these stories of like the shamans having to comb Sedna's hair, and she's always in a bad mood, and you know, and I kind of tuned into her as like quite demanding, and this part of myself that is so I'm calling it the power of the traumatized victim to kind of pull other people into the drama of being a traumatized victim, which I have actually been a victim. But even so, it's like what I've found is a freedom beyond that role of being a victim. And I can fall into it lots of times, but I can see it now. It's like, I just fell into the victim. And the victim has a lot of power. And we should remember that, because people who are very good at playing of this victim energy, they're very good at getting other people to take responsibility, but at the same time, they're never able to move on themselves because they've kind of projected it onto another person. So if they can meet someone who's willing to say, like, put down boundaries and approach this traumatized victim in a different way, like a way that believes in that person's ability to overcome their victim status, then that opens a potential pathway to recovery. Okay, so Sedna went through a big change in 2024. She moved into Gene Key 20 and into Gemini. So Gene Key 20 moves from the shadow of superficiality to the gift of self-assurance and the city of presence. And the way I kind of felt the superficiality in myself is this kind of anxious attachment. So I can stay with things, I can commit to things while everything is going my way. But as soon as there's this like shuddery, really feel it in the heart, maybe a challenge of some sort. And as soon as that anxious attachment gets triggered, which it was loads in this particular relationship, then I could feel everything becoming very superficial, because the fight and flight just wants to escape and is very agitated. So yeah, it feels like, Sedna coming into this gene key. Firstly, we may be able to see the nature of our own superficiality better. And superficiality can be lots of things, but the way I've kind of fell into it is like a lack of commitment or a lack of staying power, if you like, or a lack of being able to go deeper into something and always kind of flitting off to something else. Okay. I did have this, someone was talking about the cormorant the other day and how its wings get so wet. And it reminded me of Sedna, just like feeling the saturation of water at the bottom of the ocean, these cold oceans where she lives. And then imagining the cormorant comes up to the surface and then it dries out its wings. And I felt this kind of moving from, it was actually Taurus, so it wasn't a water sign, but it feels like Sedna came up out of the deep and into the air element, like drying her wings, allowing this kind of saturation of emotion to transmute into something else. So during this transformation that Sedna went through, I was really fascinated that Richard Rudd brought through some new animals in the dream arc. And one of them was walrus, and he actually specifically refers to Sedna. So I wanted to read this just to finish my sharing on this. So walrus, this is walrus in the dream arc. I am walrus, my people of an ancient lineage that predates many of the great ice ages. Now that's interesting because this water in the lochs, I felt it was important that the water is from like the last ice age. We are known for our resilience and our powerful ocean wisdom. Our collective ancestral spirit holds the memory of times far, far beyond human memory. And the oldest stories of your people tell of us coming from beyond the lands of the aurora. We come as balancers. With our great tusk, we stir up the seabed, releasing hidden nutrients that feed countless other tiny creatures. Despite our great bulk, we are agile beneath the waves and thus have two distinct sides. Consider this in your own life. How will you harmonize the warrior with the peacemaker unifier? We entreat you to find the cause, where human injustice must be challenged and a practical solutions found to help those in need. We walruses also draw greater power from our collectivity. We travel in huge numbers, but at the same time are elusive. How can you work together in synergistic ways and yet still use subtlety and soft touch? Walruses are also about recognition. Personal power sometimes needs to demand recognition. Do not be afraid of showing your power and displaying your achievements. Let this not come from your ego's need for recognition, but a solid place, a healthy place of solid self-esteem. And there I feel that kind of, yeah, that self-assurance, that gift of self-assurance. My people are said to be formed from the severed fingers of the Inuit sea goddess Sedna, who was punished by her father and banished forever to the bottom of the sea. Contemplate this myth and its wound in your own life. How will you rise back to the surface with the power of the walrus to claim your birthright in the world? Let go of your guilt, your rage, and your resentment towards the patriarchy. Use that same energy for your own healing and insist on being fully valued. So I think that's such an amazing channeling for Richard on the walrus, because I doubt he knows about Sedna going into Gemini and Gene Key 20, but he absolutely nailed it there, that energy of like coming out of the deep, Sedna coming out of exile and taking her place at the center of things. Yeah, so this kind of, I really feel in everything we're doing right now, it's this calling out to really step into the world in our power, be not afraid of our leadership capacity, to have the self-assurance that's not from the ego, but actually comes from the place of understanding if we just keep playing the victim, we're not really rising up into those higher frequencies where we can be and actually begin to really shape the world we're living in right now in the present. When we shape in the present, then that present is becoming the future. So we only really need to focus on right now and with the people around us. So yeah, I feel very excited about Sedna and the water. So I'm going to stop the recording and just see if either of you would like to say anything.
Thank you for that. You know, it's like a repetitive theme, isn't it? I was getting also these with the Sedna story again, the Ophelia vibes and the Nimue vibes, and just the energy of the feminine rising back up from where she left off in a lot of those stories was death, but they didn't really touch upon the rebirth process of it. And so this walrus energy especially, I think, is very important because we got kind of stuck. I think, even in my own priestess training, there was a lot of stuckness around. It was as if everybody was still in the water. We're still like flailing about, mad at the patriarchy and mad at men and mad at, everything that put us there. And, through my own healing process, it really became apparent that, we struggle against that which is ourselves. It's that masculine within us. And honoring both side by side, as we're moving into the Aquarian age. I never had a resonance with this idea of the matriarchy returning, you know, that the priestesses would arrive and it's this new age of feminine dynasty upon earth. You know, it's not what it's about. It's really about being at peace and in love with all sides of the story. And those stories begin to integrate within us if we're open to it. As the walrus said there at the very, very end, you know, to let go of the anger, to let go of all of that old energy, because it like weighs us down, and it, you know, that's what drowns you. And when we like let it go, then all of a sudden you can breathe again. And there's power in that, and there's freedom in that. You know, and as I spoke to on the cleanse this morning, you know, my own next layer with that happened on this journey, you know, where it's like, oh, I didn't know there was more. There's more when you're ready. And I've always felt Sedna's story within me. It's definitely one of my stories too. So I appreciate bringing in the walrus energy this time, and um, having that as a mascot on the journey. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. We should definitely make Walrus a mascot. And I'm reminded as well that the last Venus moon gate was the Jinki Wan, which is the pure yang. And it feels like when the feminine shifts up a frequency, then the masculine can shift too, because the two are in a dance together. And yeah, and there is more to come. It's like we're only at the beginning, I feel. And you know, in a year's time we'll probably like be in another quantum plane altogether. But yeah, it's wonderful being at this edge, really, and noticing the edge of change.
Yeah, there's always more, isn't there?
Mm.
So from my side, there are two things. I can't remember when you shared, Alison, you said that you're not afraid of the masculine anymore. And just in our community, on a personal level, I think when I first chatted to you a long time ago, I talked about the sort of, not just the general patriarchy, but the sort of Afrikaans masculine. I still find at times that a challenge. So that's something I'm going to, you know, have to look at, to be not scared of that. Because I still think there is some fear of just how to deal with this, that overriding, you know, masculinity that comes out sometimes in, you know, our community here when, you know, they're dealing with community issues. So that would be something for me to look at and just, yeah, continue working on. And then the second thing is, my mom brought us up as a single mother, but she definitely had a very strong yang side. And I think that's within me as well in some cases. Because she had to bring us up on her own, somehow she decided she was going to, you know, dig deep and use that. And, you know, for one stage after Andrew and I were married, I was pregnant. And so they went off. I went with them, but I sat in the car. They went off and went and dug up some compost. My mom needed some help. And so Andrew went to help her. And while they were digging this compost, she said to him, "Do you notice that I am digging as fast as you are?" So she had this competitive thing with the masculine. And I definitely haven't, you know, inherited all of that. But I just think, you know, a certain way of approaching things, you know, I have that sort of strong Yan energy and the goals, and let's get going and let's do this and let's, attack this and finish it, and that type of thing. So in some areas, but it definitely has been something I've been looking at. So yeah, I've got those, I think those two things to look at, for now. I think it's even, I can feel it even in my body, in parts of my body, I can just feel that. And I think that is also sometimes my resistance. It's wanting to go your own way and not this way, the softer way, but to go this way. And that I can feel it sometimes in my body is just, you get a situation and let's go, and we're going to do it that way without thinking about it. And so, yeah, that I think is the resistance. The resistance is that sort of, I want to do it my way type of thing. Or I don't understand the other way, that. So anyway, that's what I've been feeling, more recently. Thanks.
Thank you. It just feels so valuable to hold all these different cultural experiences and generations, and feel it all kind of untangling, bit by bit. And yeah, and one thing I've done actually, Lee, is when I found myself in that field where I start to feel kind of oppressed, if you like, by the masculine and the fears going off, I in my imagination, I start doing my Kali arms, swinging. And I've done that quite a few times, and it's really interesting how it shifted the energy field. I mean, it begins by shifting my energy field, but then I've seen like some interesting things happen around me as my field has shifted. So yeah, it's like, and I guess the fear is very deep as well. It's like, it's not an insubstantial thing that we're looking at here. It is something that kind of shakes us to our core. And yeah, and so it feels like quite a big challenge. But it feels also like those of us doing it, we're ready, or we wouldn't be doing it. So,
I agree with you. I mean, talking about it being quite deep. Just out of interest, just to share something, we have a gentleman living in our cottage on our property on his own. He was kicked out by his girlfriend. He's a personal trainer and he's a big guy. So he's just, and he's a strong man and enters these strongman competitions. Really there's just a lot of masculine there, but we all get on fine. But the one day he asked if the lady who works for me could work for him the one morning, and he wanted me to organize it because he goes to the gym every morning and every evening. And so I said, okay, fine, I'll organize it. So I took the lady who works for me up there, Sylvia, and we entered his cottage and looked around for what she needed to clean it. And we walked into the second room, and there was a South African flag, an old South African flag, with the 4 provinces in the center. And when you stop and you don't know quite what you're doing, and I kind of actually wanted to hide it from this lady. I didn't want her to see it because I just felt so bad. But there it was on display in the second room. So if you walk into the main part of the cottage, you don't see it. But when you walk into the room, there it is. And it's an old one. I was just telling Andrew, it's one of those old cotton ones. It's all old and, faded and whatever. But there he's got it up. So I found that interesting, that I hadn't really picked up that, old ancient beliefs system, still. So that's also something for me, challenge as to, you know, just still be open to him as a person and his huge masculinity, you know, this big man. So yeah, that was just an interesting encounter. But shame, the lady works for me, Sylvia. She was kept on calling, is that man going to want me to clean again? And is that man, she couldn't call him by his name because I think she felt so, yeah, let down by him, if you want to call it that. So yeah, anyway, it was an interesting story.
Yeah, there's so many things kind of post-apartheid, aren't they, that are very, they take a lot of unpicking. Yeah, my brother married someone who was what's called Cape Coloured in South Africa, but pretty white looking. But she was telling me stories of some of her siblings who look much more African, and like on the beach, some of them would get removed from the beach and others not. So she had this really strange upbringing. But I think a lot of the breakdown of their marriage is because of these underlying stories that have never really been acknowledged or spoken about. Yeah, but yes, that is quite a tricky one there. Yeah, wow. Anyway, you can always share with me because I understand the dynamic.
100%. Oh, for sure. I mean, he's there for a reason. So
Yeah, exactly. He's brought in this whole like old energies and
yes,
karmic trails.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the community in has this, you know, wide range, you know, from the very, very, well, probably that old-fashioned views to, you know, anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, if everyone's done, we will close the call. Yeah, thank you for coming. And the same, you can go on Taraka.io. Let me put this here, www. So you can get a free, I don't know if you've done this, Lee, but you can get a free chart that has all these asteroids and TNOs on them. So you can find out where Sedna is in your chart. Most of us will have her somewhere in Taurus, those gene keys. I'm in gene key 27, but you can have a look anywhere. And, you know, if you want to, if you feel drawn to a particular goddess, you can contemplate that gene key and what it means. But I know you've got lots on anyway at the moment.
Yeah, I have done it before for something else. I do know how to do it. I'll just see how I go.
Okay, yeah, don't overwhelm yourself. But
yeah.
I'm hoping that just the stories of the masculine, feminine kind of, just make them stronger in our field. So that will be good. So I'll see you all tomorrow in Kali, and enjoy the rest of your day, evening. I'll speak to you then. Bye.
Thanks, Alison.
I'm still amazed by the geographics of our get-togethers. Like it's like 3 different continents happening right now, and there's just 3 of us.
I know.
Happy.
It's weird.
I think I mentioned to you, Alison, what was interesting was that this one guy is like very excited that at some stage in the future, I did mention it to you, that he's like, well, we won't have to do this in the future. We will be able to do it, you know,
psychically.
Yes, yeah.
We won't need Zoom, we'll just do it.
Yes.
It'll just transmit.
Yes, that's right. Anyway, thanks, Alison. All right then.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.